let me know if you can see it or if you have trouble or
Yeah,
whatever.
I can see it.
Cool. All right. And so what I call this is just how to start launching your own syndications for funds or funds through private placements. And we'll just get right started to it. Like I said, I was expecting a couple more people on here, so I always like to kind of set the tenor and the tone. I want it to be casual. I want you to ask questions, be respectful. Don't be causing a ruckus while others are trying to listen. If you do take a call or whatever, just put it on mute. I think you can mute yourself there. And again, let's engage and have fun. We're all here trying to better ourselves, so let's try to ask questions and it helps me too because I recently launched that. What I coined the little Intrafund inside of Keller Williams. And it really surprised me how, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but like how much I don't connect with, somebody starting out, when you're the terminology, the examples, the things I use, it's normal industry jargon, you know what I'm saying? And then,
yeah.
But if you're not in that industry, you don't understand it, and you don't know it, and I'm really bad about that. So I'm trying to get better. So I hope let me know if you need clarification or definition on something.
Well, I'm a layman to it, so
well, good. Yeah. Well, like I said, that's what I need. I need to be able to connect a little better. But a little bit about me, I guess you already know some of this, and most people do, but I just want to kind of cover a little bit more. And again, I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've successfully exited 2 different businesses. I failed a bunch of them, but successfully was able to exit 2. I've launched 7 private placements, current GP, co-GP on 4 private placements. I've taken 655 units full cycle. I published a book. I own multiple different businesses, and I'm operating in the real estate, M&A, and venture capital space right now. Father of 3, husband of 15 years, and I've been featured on the Entrepreneur's Top 100 Business Leaders list, Canvas Rebel, and Nashville Voyager, which are all pretty good publications. So there you go. All right.
What's your book's name? I didn't know you had one.
Yeah, it's called 6 Months to 655 Units. I'll bring you a copy. I've updated it from the physical copy that I've got. I've went back and kind of updated some things because one thing I found out that I'm not is an author.
Right.
And so I wrote this book, and it was just kind of on my journey of how I was able to get in on the GP on the 655 units, and it really was out of. I didn't, I tried to do it when I first started trying to syndicate. I had the capital resources, I had the rehab knowledge, but I didn't have any experience as on the GP and the lender's eyes. And so a lot of people don't talk about that because, it's not something that you can, just get around. Either you have it or you don't. And so when you're going to apply for 10, 15, 20, 30 million dollars sometimes of this agency debt, they they're going to look at you from an experience standpoint, and are you going to run that thing in the ground, or are you going to be able to complete it? And so it was I kind of documented my little journey of how I was able to partner up with some guys that have already done some syndications, that had some deals, and I essentially raised some capital for them in exchange for a position in the GP. And then once I did that, then I could go back to the lenders and say, hey, yeah, I've got, I'm a GP on, 655 units. And like, oh, okay. Cause they don't really ask about how much, you know what I'm saying? Even though I had just a small fraction based on how much capital I was able to raise, it checked the box for them. And that's really what these lenders want to see. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So big thing here, disclaimer, this is not legal advice. This is conversations between a couple of people. So, I got to make sure I say that there. And so I'll get into it here real quick. And again, ask questions if any of this need clarification or don't make sense or whatever. Introduction, what are private placements? Private placements are Regulation D offerings underneath the Jobs Act. Without getting too far in the weeds, the Jobs Act was established in 2012 and revised in 2017. It was revised for the better. Exempt offerings is what they're considered. Exempt meaning that they're exempt underneath the Investment Advisory Act. It only requires a notice of filing, so you're not actually filing for annual audits and stuff like that, like you are with Regulation A's and some of the more traditional, I don't know what you call them, traditional offerings. You got two main structures that I like to operate. There's all kinds of subset exemptions underneath the Regulation D, but the two that most people need to start with would be a 506B or a 506C. You've probably heard those terms bouncing around, but I'll kind of dig into those a little bit more. And why you should care. It allows you to raise capital. That's probably the biggest one. It legally allows you to go out and raise essentially unlimited amounts of capital. Allows you to buy larger deals than you could by yourself. With essentially a larger purchasing power, I guess would be a way to say it as well. It allows you to grow and scale quickly. Once you figure out how to do this, then there's nothing that is unbuyable. You basically go out and buy anything you want to, and then essentially you get to live the life of a fund manager, which we all are chasing that, I believe. Let's see the next one. Continuing on here, the one thing I like to start with whenever I'm talking to somebody about private placements and just like the potential and the opportunity here is the biggest thing is you got to be able to. It's really a mind shift. You got to change your perspective, and what that means is you got to start thinking bigger in the terms of like I know you are in mainly in like the single family space, and once you start understanding these private placements and whatnot, it really essentially allows you to remove the price from the equation and start thinking bigger in the scene, in the scale of like, if I'm doing one, I could do 10 houses, or if I'm doing, a single family, I could do an office building or a multifamily. You got to change your perspective. And what I think about, anymore when I look at a potential investment opportunity, I look at, I think more about like the equity raise more so than I do the price of the building or the size of the building or whatever it may be. It's more about how hard's the equity going to be to raise. You know what I'm saying? And just a little fun fact is it takes the same amount of energy to invest $1 as it does 10 million. The only difference are the numbers of zeros. And one thing you'll find out, and I found this out along the way too, is that once you start talking to these investors and sort of picking their brain and whatnot, you find out that sometimes it's not the deal, it's the fact that what you're asking for just don't move the needle for them. I think I had somebody else want to come in. Eric, we'll bring him in. We'll keep going though. I think he's here. Eric, are you here? You might have to unmute yourself. Oh, well. All right, Eric, if you're here, you can. Oh, there he is. Let's see if I can unmute yourself, Eric. Well, we'll keep going. All right, Eric, down at the bottom left, should be able. You might have to allow Chrome to or Google to access your microphone, but I'll just kind of recap real quick, Eric. We kind of just started, but just I'd like for you to be unmuted so you can ask questions. I want this to be fun and intuitive and engaging. So if you there you go. Looks like you got unmuted. So
I think I'm good to go now.
Yeah, there you are. So
all right.
Like I said, we kind of just got started, but really just wanted to have you guys on here where you can talk and communicate. I want this to be fun and learning, sort of a learning experience. But what I was just talking about was, just your perspective when you start understanding these private placements and what you can do with them. The biggest thing is to start thinking bigger, kind of remove the price from the equation, start thinking about the equity raise and how hard it's going to be. And what I was just explaining to Charles there is that, when you start talking to these investors, you start getting around them and start learning. A lot of times it's not you, it's not the deal, it's not the structure. It's the fact that you're asking for a dollar amount that just don't move the needle for them. And so essentially, starting to learn these private placements and essentially getting larger opportunities has actually opened up the door for more investments, even for me. All right, a couple definitions I like to jump into, and again, throw in the comments there or just holler at me if there's anything you'd like me to add to this. But not sure if you guys have heard of this or not, but general partners, they kind of play an active. They are the active member in a private placement. They're they basically are over the daily operations, the managing partner. Limited partners, also known as silent partners, they're not involved in daily operations, and they are also called limited partners. A lot of people don't fully understand this, but they're called limited partners because they are limited to the liability for their investment. As a general partner, you are technically signing on as for debt and stuff like that. So essentially, general partners, you have an unlimited. They say unlimited, but once we get into the structure of this, I'll show you how you can kind of protect yourself, protect your liabilities. But limited partners they're limited to the amount of capital that they invest. They are not signed on debt or any other thing other than that. So if they invest 100,000, that's the most that they're at risk. Beyond that, Regulation D is an exemption that allows companies to generally raise an unlimited amount of capital. That's kind of basically what we're talking about. Two different subsectors of that. I know there's 3 or 4 different exemptions underneath there, but the 2 we're really focusing on is 506B, which allows you up to 35 non-accredited and unlimited accredited investors. But you're not allowed to solicit that. There's no marketing there. They expect you to have a pre-existing relationship with your limited and unlimited accredited and unaccredited investors. 506C is accredited investors only, but it does allow you to openly solicit, including social media, which social media is a very powerful tool. And if once you start mixing these private placements with the 506C and bringing in sort of the marketing game, it does become pretty powerful. You have a very wide reach. You can cast a wide net if you need to help raise capital. Use cases on this, some examples of what this can be used for. I'm sure we're all familiar with real estate, but like you got residential real estate, commercial real estate, business acquisitions, venture capital, sports and entertainment. You also got this can be used in public equities to be able to raise some capital and go after public equities, energy. I'm sorry. Oh, I thought I heard somebody.
I was turning the page. Sorry.
Sorry. And again, like I said, if you got any questions, just chime in, man. I want this to be. I want us to have a conversation about it. So, but pretty much anything. Anything from a cell phone. I mean, at the small scale, all the way up to large commercial assets or what have you. Anything you can essentially wrap an offering around and raise capital for, as long as you do it in this manner. All right, so now we're going to kind of start digging into some of the get all the introduction stuff out of the way. Through my experiences on this and through my different private placements and that I've done, that I'm a part of, the one thing that kind of stands out in how to find quick success is in niching down. And what that means, just to give you an example here, is kind of say you take a real estate as the general section, you niche that down to single family. And then like I did with Keller Williams is I niched it down to brokerages. And to just give you an example here, same things, real estate, single family. And I was connected with the ownership group in some Keller Williams. So I went after them and essentially created a fund inside of Keller Williams, which I coined Intrafund, which Intrafund is one of my programs that which you can build a fund within a business organization or a following. So like if you're an influencer or somebody has some followings, you want to monetize those. And so that's what I've discovered through this, is that, niching down and it takes some creative thinking sometimes, or just some trial and error, really. But the more you can niche down, the quicker you can stand out, the quicker you can, really relate with your investors and deal flow and investors, because really that's the name of the game, is matchmaking those two.
Sorry to interrupt, but that be a 506B though, like with your following and stuff? Is that up? You said up to 35 people unaccredited?
Correct. Yeah. So that's a great question, and that's exactly what I did with Keller Williams. And again, that's one reason that I kind of honed in on that, because I was hanging around these owners all the time, and I was like, man, you guys have a plethora of potential investors here. You know every one of them. You have those pre-existing relationships. I said, this is a beauty for a 506B, right? I mean, this is a nice setup. And so that's exactly right. You have that pre-existing there, and it does allow you to bring in those 35 non-accredited. But surprising enough, what I found out through doing that with Keller Williams is, even though I was expecting, and just give you a little tip kind of too, what I did on that is, it was our debut fund, our first fund is $1 million there. But there's also what you call sort of an execution point. So like, even though we're targeting $1 million, I knew I could execute on our strategy with about, 500,000 or somewhere around there, And so what I did, and this is what I was expecting, but I'll finish in a second. But what I did is I took 35 spots and basically broke that down into like, $10,000 minimums, $20,000 minimums, because even though they're non-accredited, don't mean that they're coming in at the minimum amount. You know what I'm saying? Just because you're non-accredited, you'd be surprised how many non-accredited out there have $100,000 sitting around. And so what I did is I broke that down to where, worst case scenario, we had 35 non-accredited come in, we still could hit our execution number and still be able to perform with the with our strategy. But what I actually found out is that so far we've only used like 2 or 3 non-accredited spots, which is interesting. And a fun fact on that, I don't know if you guys keep up with this or not, but they just passed a new thing to where you can take a test to qualify as a credited investor. Have you guys seen that at all?
No, but that was one of my questions, is how do you go through that process?
So to qualify a accredited or non-accredited, I mean, they have a general term or general threshold. It's what, 250,000 a year or $1 million net worth, I think is what it is, to be able to consider to be accredited. And so if they are accredited, they either have to provide a letter through their CPA, which that's on them to be able to generate that letter. Excuse me. Or there's some third parties which is what I use, and it may cost you like $50, but they'll go through the thing, and they'll basically qualify, so they can self-qualify that way. Non-accredited, I mean, they usually pretty much know if they're non-accredited, and if it's borderline, then I typically just roll them in as non-accredited. Last thing you want to do is try to bend over backwards and get somebody that's non-accredited as an accredited, and then they start bitching and moaning about their investment. And so that's the last thing you want to do is put somebody in a situation. But yeah, with this new test thing out, though, I mean, I think it's going to be real powerful. I mean, it's really opening up, because here was the argument, and the reason why and again, tell me if I'm getting too much in the weeds here. We've got 3 or 4 more slides to cover, but the argument is that the threshold for accredited investors was set in the 80s. And so $250,000 a year income in the 80s compared to today's time with inflation and cost of living and everything, they were saying is actually more equivalent to like, making a couple million a year. You know what I'm saying? Just the difference. And so, and the $1 million net worth is more like 10 million in net worth nowadays. And so that's what was their argument. They're saying, hey, look, these are outdated regulations. And so that's the reason why they said, okay, well, what we'll do is we'll pass an exam. And I've not seen the exam yet or the test or anything, so I don't know exactly how complicated it is. But, hopefully it's not overly complex, and it's something that will be relatively available to where people can kind of go in and take the test and just provide that, I'm sure there's probably some sort of completion or something like that they can supply whenever they're, wanting to invest as accredited investors. But it's good news for private placements, because I mean, this is something that's really going to, it's widening the pool, right? Now you got more fish in the pond to go after, as long as they're not going to overcomplicate it, which hopefully they won't. So, all right. The next little thing you need to think about would be strategy. So you got your niche, and niche meaning you niche down into whatever you're doing. Another way, real quick, on niche, something that I found is in business acquisition. I mean, I'm all about some businesses right now, and you could take business as the sort of primary sector, and then you could go down into like manufacturing, and then you could even go down into like plastic manufacturing or something like that. So you can niche way down, and again, what that does is it just allows you to get more narrow and more specific when you're talking to investors and looking at deals. And so therefore, it really helps you niche down, and it's a trick to getting quick success with a private offering. Now, once you have that niche, you want to start working on your strategy. Strategy meaning, what you're looking to buy, what you're looking to do with it, how you're looking to exit. And just to give you an example, what I did, Life by Design was the fund that I did inside of Keller Williams. And I'm just using this as an example because it's fresh on my mind. It's the most recent one that I did. And so what I did inside there is I built a 3-pillar strategy, which the first pillar would be, and this is all just for example, is like, build and sell houses, fix and flip. This is single family, build and sell, fix and flips. The second pillar would be like a buy and hold, short-term rental. And then the third pillar would be some sort of multifamily or CRE. And I kind of put on there the reasons why. The first pillar would be like active income. It's sort of capital gains investing. The second one is kind of a hybrid between a income focused and also a hold. You can hold those for 5 years. So theoretically, you can get some appreciation off of those homes as well. And then the third one is one of the beauties of multifamily, for example, is that it's tax advantaged income. So you get the ability to do cost segs and cost segregation, and can hopefully get some of that bonus appreciation to offset the capital gain investing, what I call capital gain investing of the first pillar. And so that was sort of the strategy that I built out. And I don't want to overcomplicate it and think that it's like that it's got to be really complicated. It don't. But this was just a fresh example that I had on my mind, that, you want to start, like I said, developing that strategy. And it's okay if you don't necessarily know the strategy right off the bat. As you start looking at deals, talking to investors, your strategy is going to start developing. You know what I'm saying? And well, I'll get into some more of that here in a minute too, but I'll just go ahead and kind of preface is that one of the mistakes I did when I first started in private placements is that I went out and I built this whole big old thing, and then I took it to the market and found out that nobody liked it, or that, investors are not going to invest in it. And so I typically don't get too deep into things until you start having these conversations with investors, because they're going to say, say for example, you're offering an 8%, pref equity return or something like that. And come to find out that everybody's looking for like a 10, or vice versa. You're offering 8 and everybody's expecting 6, well, you just kind of gouged yourself 2 points there. You know what I'm saying? So your investors, and through conversations and through looking at these deals, will hone in that strategy as well. So it's okay to, but you do need to have some sort of like idea, you know what I'm saying? Even if it's, I want to buy these plastic manufacturers, and I want to bring in outside, technologies or something and make them more efficient. Like, it can be that simple to start with. Does that make sense? All right. And then the next thing you want to do is you want to choose a name and a brand for your fund, if you will, well, more or less it's your operations company. You want to choose a name and a brand that reflects your strategy. You want investors to be able to quickly understand what you're doing. And I'll give an example of this, is that there's a company gosh, they're out in the Midwest there somewhere. I've been kind of studying on them, but they buy businesses for a long term. Like their fund is a 30-year fund. And so they named their company Permanent Equity. And I was thinking, man, what a beautiful name and brand. You know what I'm saying? So when you go to somebody and say, hey, I'm with Permanent Equity, when you're talking to a potential seller of a business, you know, one of their biggest concerns is that you're just going to strip it down and sell it off. You know what I'm saying? Just ruin the business. But if you go to them and say, hey, look, I'm Will with Permanent Equity, and they're like, oh, okay, what does that mean? It's like, yeah, well, we have a 30-year fund. We invest for the long term. It's like, okay, you guys are not, you know, coming in here and tearing this thing down. And then vice versa, when you're talking to investors and you say, yeah, I'm Will with Permanent Equity. It's, what does that mean? It's like, yeah, well, we invest for a long time. You know, long term, we're expecting to be in these things for, you know, 10, 20, 30 years. Well, what that does is immediately it separates the people that are looking for the, you know, the 1 to 2, 3 year returns, you know, the in and out people. And then it also kind of, again, finds your niche within the investors, that the people that are looking for that longer term hold. But I love that one as an example, because I think they did a fantastic job with sort of choosing a name and a brand that reflects the strategy of what they're trying to do. Does it make sense? All right. The next thing, this is where it kind of gets a little deep. So you bounce in if you have any questions. Formation. All right. So this would be a fund formation. And this is a little graphic that I found, but it does a pretty decent job of explaining, you know, sort of the structure. So over here on the financial sponsor is you as the GP, general partnership, which is also the management company. They had it separated, but I do mine all in one. Some people will do two different companies. They'll do a general partner company and then they'll do a management company and separate those two, but I always just do them together. And then you have your investors over here that come directly into the fund. All right. So, and we'll get into this in just a second on entities and what you need to set this up. But what you really are looking at here is if you could draw a line right down the middle here, if you can see I don't know if you can see my arrow there, but basically you've got two entities. One is you as the general partner, as the sponsor, and then two would be the fund, and the investors are coming directly into the fund, and you are coming into the fund as well. So the fund is actually where the partnership is, if you will, and then that partnership is what buys, in this example, they call them portfolio companies, which could be a single family, a multifamily, it could be a business. You know, each one of these assets down here or portfolio assets are owned. Oh, what happened? Are owned by the fund itself, which the fund is a partnership split between the investors and you as the sponsor. And what they have here is carried interest is also just that's kind of a technical term for carry. That's your percentage. So say, for example, your structure or your strategy on here is 80% to the investors and 20% to the GP, to the sponsor. Then imagine, this bar, if that represents 100%, you're going to have a line split here somewhere, which is, your 20% will come up in a carried interest and the 80% will carry to the investors. And so that's how that partnership would be broke up. You can do 70-30, 50-50, 60-40, whatever, you deem necessary in your strategy. That's how it'll be structured. And then your management fees, again, going back to your strategy, 1%, 2%, 5%. I mean, wherever you find, the norm is kind of at 2%. And so your management fees will come up to your company as well. They're paid annually. It's an annual basis, but it's paid monthly, if that makes sense. And your carried interest, again, it goes back to your strategy. This could be whenever there's a distribution, basically, typically though. So if it's a quarterly distribution, if it's annually, or whenever you make an exit, just think of this private equity fund here as it is its own entity. It's its own LLC. And whenever it receives capital and everything's basically split 80% to the investors, 20% to the financial sponsors, if that's what you end up doing in your strategy. Now, again, without getting too deep into this, sometimes they have what they call pref equity. If you decide to put that into your structure. And pref equity just means that, say you had a 6% pref equity, the investors would get the first 6%, and then you would get 20% of anything above the 6%, if that makes sense. And again, I don't want to get too complicated in this. I'm just trying to get some basic understanding out. I use Wyoming LLCs. I used to use Delaware, but Wyoming really has the same amount of protections and anonymity that Delaware has, but they are literally a fraction of the cost. And Delaware, I don't know if you guys deal with Delaware at all on LLCs, but they are getting outrageous. So you would have a Wyoming LLC for your GP, your company, and then you would have a Wyoming LLC for the fund. And then typically each one of these portfolio companies would be an LLC itself. And since they are operating in a state specific to that location, then you would just do a state specific LLC for those. So for example, if me and you two did a fund, say I was the GP, I would have my Wyoming LLC for my GP, Wyoming LLC for the fund. You guys would come in as individuals or LLCs, whatever your structure is, and we're doing 80-20. And then portfolio company, say we bought a multifamily in Tennessee, then this one would be a Tennessee LLC at the asset level, which would be owned by a Wyoming LLC, which would be split 80-20. And then I would get 20% plus my management fee, and you guys as investors would get 80%. Is that making sense?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
So that, I didn't know if you were going to get to it later. Do you have to identify what you're going to invest in before you take anybody's money, or can you put it in that structure and then pick what you want, essentially?
Yeah. So the answer is kind of yes and no. Legally, when here's the big misconception, and I think this goes back to a lot of your attorneys and different people because they make a fortune in the gray area, right? You're only held to standards of regulations of capital or SEC and FINRA and all that stuff is when you receive the capital. So until you physically receive the capital, the timing don't start, the documents don't necessarily make sense or anything. It's when you receive that capital. So to answer your question, the reason why I kind of say yes is because when you're talking to investors, I mean, for me to get you to invest in something, you're going to want to see strategy and documents. You know what I'm saying? You're going to want to see those. There is a little workaround that I'll show you here shortly, but it's kind of a yes and no. So you don't necessarily have to have anything in place while you're getting to, say, if you can see my arrow kind of just above the fund actually committing the capital. You don't necessarily need anything other than conversations and deals and just, hypotheticals, you know what I'm saying? Just throwing stuff out there. But you will need documents signed within 15 days of actually receiving the capital. So 15 days is kind of that magical number that they give you to get everything in order. Now, I will say this. 506B is the one you got to pay attention to when as far as documents, because there are unaccredited investors in there. Typically, if you have unaccredited investors in there, those are the ones you got to watch. You got to make sure you cater to them, make sure you got the proper documents and stuff signed, which we'll go over that in a minute. 506Cs, technically, through the SEC, as a 506C, when you identify as accredited investor, you are identifying that you are sophisticated enough to understand the risk and obligations with your investment. And so, through the SEC rules and regulations, whatever, there's no documents actually required outside of a subscription agreement. The main reason why you want to do documents is really for protection for yourself. I mean, that's kind of the gist of the documents outside of, you're non-accredited. And does that answer your question?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. And like I said, we'll dig into this here again in a minute, and I'll try to keep speeding it up. So if I get too much in the weeds, just tell me to move on. Here's a formation of a syndication. So syndications and funds are essentially the same thing to a degree. The only difference is you don't really have the fund setting in between. in this example, you would have your investor entity, which would be, you, I guess, your GP, and that same GP would be the partner over here on the left that says the management entity. So investor entity, management entity, it's the same thing. So that would be, say we're going into say we're syndicating a building or something, right? And it would be the same thing as in this example over here. The only difference is you don't really have the fund. Does that make sense? Because you're going directly into the asset itself. And so what you would do is you would actually set it up as Class A would be your investors. So the limited partners would come in as Class A investors, and then you would also be the Class B investors. So say we go into a building, we're syndicating a building. Well, then I would have a building syndication LLC, and then of that LLC, the investors would own 80%. I would own 20%, and you would get your management fees and all that stuff would still happen the same, if that makes sense. It's just that the biggest difference for me to explain would be in a fund, you do not have an asset identified. In a syndication, you do have an asset identified. So if I say, hey, I've got this 123 Main Street building, I'm wanting to buy this, I can raise money. We go into an LLC, which is the syndication, which would own that asset, and you speak specifically about that asset, right? Whereas a fund, you're saying, hey, I'm raising this fund. It's more of a strategy. Does that make sense? Like a fund is a strategy, whereas a syndication is a specific asset. Does that make difference? Is that making sense? Like in the difference in those? But as far as the legality of it, the legal structure is really pretty much the same. You still have you as the general partner and the manager and the manager. And you still have your LPs as limited partners. You're still coming together as partners to buy this asset. And then as far as the classes and the distributions and all that stuff, it all still works the same. Again, I use Wyoming LLCs unless unless it's the portfolio asset. You want to put that. So again, if it's a building in Tennessee, you want that to be 123 Main Street LLC, which typically they're going to be in an LLC anyway when you buy them. You can just assume that LLC if you can, or start a new one. But then as far as the management company and the investors, it's good to have those in a Wyoming LLC. Making sense? I'm probably bouncing around a little bit. All right. So once you have your formation, you got your LLCs. The next thing you're going to need is bank accounts, right? So how to set up your bank accounts for a fund and a syndication is pretty much the same. You're going to have one bank account for you as the GP. So like for my, Morris Acquisitions, I've got an account for them, right? And then you're going to have two accounts for the fund or the syndication. One account is going to be called the subscription account. So it could be like Morris Acquisition subscription account. And then you would have another one, a separate account, which is called Morris Acquisitions operating account. And the reason why you keep those two separate is because it goes back to your docs. You're talking about your documents, your PPMs and stuff like that. You want to make sure you keep those separate, and you want to make sure you have it in your docs that it talks about those specifically, because when it comes to factoring returns, you want to make sure that it's in there, that it says that no returns, no interest, no dividends, nothing is calculated until you transfer from subscription account to your operating account. Does that make sense? Yeah, and and the reason why, again, is because it goes back, because what you'll run into, and this is from experience, what you'll run into is you'll have one investor comes in on, say, January. Another guy comes in February. Well, you make the acquisition in March. Well, the guy in February or January was like, hey, where's my 2 months of cash flow here or whatever, where's mine? And that way they understand that when they go into a subscription account, it's basically a holdings account. You're just holding it there. There's no interest occurred. There's no profit. There's no loss, right? It's just being held there. And then their actual returns and everything will start when you actually move it to the operating account. And the only reason why you would move it to the operating account is to make an allocation to move forward with an acquisition, right? All right, so documents needed for this. Each entity is going to need an operating agreement, and again, there's really no set rules to what an operating agreement looks like. I've got a template that I use for every one of mine, and it works for every one of my bank accounts. And so you got to have the operating agreement for, say, for each account. So it'd be for the GP account and it would be for the fund account. Or if you're doing a syndication, same thing there. You need an EIN for both, and then you'll need the formation documents, which, if you're forming in Wyoming, you'll need the Wyoming formation docs. Pretty standard there. All right, so now we're about to get into sort of changing gears a little bit. So I put this in here to kind of pause for some questions. Anything sticks out to you on what we've covered so far?
Yeah, I have a quick question, Will. For the syndication, is that something that you would, so say for someone that's new in raising capital, would you recommend syndication for a specific deal and some sort of asset, and then after you start to build some traction in the marketplace, then would you transition into a fund? You start to get some credibility and things of that nature doing a syndication directly into an asset, and then build that for other investors to come in and say, hey, look at what we've done over here. Now we're going to create a fund and then kind of drive that. Is that kind of along the lines of what you would do if you were newer?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would. The first thing I would say is just be real about your potential investor base, because if you are connected to 10 different millionaires, multimillionaires or something like that, syndication is still going to be easier across the board because you can speak at deal specifics. You know what I'm saying? You can say this building, this thing. The difference is that you don't have to, though. If you've got access to great capital, I mean, say your uncle's worth $100 million, starting a fund is going to be a little easier for you than it would be somebody that's just true beginning. But if I was starting out, true beginner, didn't really have, maybe had some access, but not anything that you felt, not an uncle, you know what I'm saying? Not a rich uncle, then yes, typically a syndication is going to be the path for you to go. And I wouldn't go large. Again, it goes, and we're going to cover this in a minute too. It goes back to track record, just like you said. Start with. I mean, you can start with a single family if you wanted to, and or a small multifamily, a quadplex, sixplex, eightplex, something. Start with that, and that way you can speak specifics around it. The one thing I will say about a syndication that is a struggle, and not a lot of people talk about it, is that when you're syndicating, it becomes a juggling act between getting the deal and getting it locked up and raising capital, because you're under a time restraint. And so what happens a lot of times, you end up, you go out, you find this deal, it's like, oh man, it's great. You go ahead and you say you put it under LOI, you get it locked up, or even under a PSA, you get it and you're in your due diligence, you put 10, 20, 50 grand down to hold it. You're in that due diligence period where you say you're lucky enough to negotiate a 60-day due diligence period. Well, now you've got the asset, you got it locked up. Well, you're basically strapped to 60 days to try to, one, do your due diligence like you actually need to do on the deal, and two, you're trying to raise capital. And so that's where a syndication does get a little tough, if you will, because it goes back to, like, you ever heard like the chicken or the egg? That's kind of what comes to mind for me, is that it kind of goes back to the chicken or the eggs. Like, well, do I get the capital first and then find a deal, or do I get the deal and then find the capital? But it's doable, is what I'll say. People do it every single day. The one thing you can do to and we'll cover this in just a minute too, but the one thing you can do is start prepping cap equity early. You know what I'm saying? And like I said, we'll get into that here in a minute on some tactics that I've done in the past. But long-winded answer to answer your question, yes, I would most definitely start with the syndication, and keep it simple, keep it small, keep it simple. Get one done, and then once it's done, and you know, say it's 3 months, you're in and out in a flip, you know what I'm saying? You syndicate it, you're in and out in a flip. Well, then you could talk about the returns and, oh, we made 37%, you know, we made this, we made that. You don't have to disclose that it was a $225,000 house. You know what I'm saying? You have something, a track record, something to build off that's real numbers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. That helps. Thank you. So that's kind of where I'm at right now, right? I've done smaller flips and things of that nature, but so we have some traction there, and just to go from that to kind of what you've been discussing, kind of seems like it's a little bit far fetched, right? But that's partly my mentality too, right? Just my mindset. So just stuck in a small mindset, small think type of thing.
Yeah. Well, and I agree. And one thing I'll say about mindset is that, you know, it's easy for somebody that's done something to sit here and say it's easy, right? I struggle with this coaching stuff and training stuff. You know, I'm sitting here saying I could do these private places with my eyes shut, and I'm in, you know, 27 different deals, and Charles knows what all I got, you know, some of what all I got going on. And the thing is that what you'll find out is that there's a lot of people in your local market that are busy professionals, retirees, whatever. They're sitting there saying, man, I wish somebody would come along. I've got $50,000 that I wish, you know, somebody would help me find a deal to go into. You know what I'm saying? And so you come along, and that's the value you bring, and that's the mind shift you got to have, is that, you know, a lot of people say, oh man, I'm asking for money. I'm raising capital, I'm asking for money. It's kind of that, who wants to raise capital? But the way you got to think about it is that you're actually bringing a value to passive investors that enables them to go on vacation, go travel, go do what they want to do, right? I mean, think about retirees. I mean, my dad, for example, he just sold his business, just so, you know, and he's got some liquidity laying around. And, you know, he's sitting there saying, he calls me every day, Will, you find us a deal to go into, you find something to do, you know what I'm saying? He is wanting to do that so that he can go off and play and do whatever he wants to do in retirement in order to, you know, but he wants his money to be working. You know what I'm saying? He don't have the time or the resources or the knowledge to go out and find a good deal, fix that deal, flip that deal, sell that deal. But he does have money, you know what I'm saying? And he wants that money to be in that deal. And so you are providing a value to them that, you know, and that's the way you kind of got to start thinking about it. You know what I'm saying? It's just that you hadn't done it yet is the only thing. Once you do it, and especially once you do it 2 or 3 times, I mean, your mind really starts elevating. You know, it's like one of the slides you missed there was sort of you know, changing your perspective. You know what I'm saying? Like you gotta start changing that perspective, and you know, once you do this once or twice, then the sky's really the limit, and you start realizing that. You really do.
Thank you.
No long-winded answer, but anyway, all right, we'll keep moving for the sake of time. All right, so here's this kind of a checklist where we're at. What we've done so far, we've identified our niche, we've built out our strategy, we've chosen our name and our branding. We've got our formation of kind of what we're doing, whether it's a fund, a syndication, 506B, 506C, and we've got our bank accounts open. So technically we are open for business and ready to go make millions, right? All right. So now it starts the good stuff. This is the investors. So you got your vehicle, which is what all we just covered, what we've got done so far. That's essentially what I call your vehicle. You've got your vehicle. It's sitting there. It's gassed up. It's ready to go, right? You want to start courting potential investors based on the structure you chose. So what that means is like 506B or C, depending on where you are or which one you decided to go with, then essentially it enables you to do different things, right? And so you want to start courting them, meaning you want to start having conversations with them. You want to start finding out, you know, talking to them, networking with them, finding out, you know, have they, like my dad did, has he had a recent liquidity event? You know, are they looking for a passive role? Are they more active? Are they interested in real estate? Are they interested in, you know, business acquisition? Are they interested in energy, like public equities, private equities? Like you just want to start courting these people and start getting around these investors for a knowledge, right? And what you're doing here too is you're also kind of going back to your strategy, even though you may have just a general strategy at the time that you're starting to talk to them and network with them. Through those conversations, you're going to actually start honing down that strategy as well. It's just sort of a natural thing that happens. Second thing you're going to start doing, which will help with the first thing, is start looking for potential deals. And what you're looking for here, you're looking for possible deals to use as examples and case studies. And so when you're talking to these investors and say you've got 3 or 4 deals that you're looking at, this is what I did getting started. And honestly, I still do it to this day. If I've got a deal, I'll be talking to some investors or something like, hey man, I'm looking at a deal right now that's, this. Is that something, what's your thoughts on that? It's like, oh man, I'd I'd love to own something like that. You know what I'm saying? It's very casual, right? Kind of off the cuff, but or vice versa, like, no, I don't do that. I don't touch that stuff. I'm only a real estate man. I'm only a mobile home park man. That's what I know. It's what I've been in. But you're also going to use those as case studies too, to where once you do get some people interested, because a case study means that you're actually going to take that deal, you're looking through it, you got the information, you're looking through the rent rolls and the assets or whatever it may be about the deal, the economics of the deal, and you're looking through it, and you want to actually start kind of running some numbers, right? You're doing your own due diligence on the deal, and you've got those numbers. So that's what a case study means. And that way, when you're talking to them, they're like, hey, yeah, I'd be interested in something like that. So, well, shoot, I'd be happy to share some of the numbers with you. You know what I'm saying? So now you're getting that sort of that next level conversation with these investors, and it's not salesy in any way. It's very, kind of slide right in with them. But then you're also going to be asking kind of, hey, well, on a deal like this, what would you expect to return? What would you expect to make on a deal like this? And again, this goes back to kind of honing that strategy, because you're not exactly sure yet. The strategies can get super complicated. I try to keep mine as simple as possible. But again, I've had this happen 2 ways. One is that I've been thinking, let's say I've been thinking 6%, and all the investors wanted 10%. And I've been thinking 10%, and I find out that all of them were happy with 6%. You know what I'm saying? So like, I left money on the table on one end, and on the other end, I didn't get any investors. So it's kind of figuring out where that's at is what you're trying to do here. And so when you have these case studies, you're like, hey, what would be your expectation? If you were to invest $100,000 into a mobile home park, like what would you expect on that? And it's like, well, I don't know. It's like, well, what would be, what would be good? Would 10% be good on that? So you can kind of start having these high level conversations with your investors, which is one, prepping your investors, like I was talking about in the syndication there a second ago. And then 2, it's also kind of honing in your strategy to where you can find out, really what people are really interested in. And then you're going to try to find a small group of investors that you can clump together and be able to actually get them to move forward. Any questions on that? Nope. All right. So this is what I call matchmaking. So you want to tailor your offering. It kind of goes back to what I was just talking about. You want to play matchmaker here between the deals you're finding and the investors you're talking to. So again, just to kind of reiterate, you want to be networking, talking to investors, everything you do. I don't care if it's your friends, family, business owner. I mean, everybody, you start changing your perspective, like on your daily. If you go get coffee and the coffee shop, the owner or whatever, start talking to them. You never know. They may have 25 grand sitting around that they're begging somebody, they just wish they knew somebody that would invest it for them. Right. And so start having these conversations, start talking to everybody you can, start kind of poking them a little bit, prepping them for some questions. And then same thing, looking at deals. What are you, what's your strategy around, and what are some of the deals that you're looking at? And then that way you can kind of start playing matchmaker. And again, to go back to what we were just talking about too, your goal with this first, because we're talking about getting started, right? So your goal with this first one is to get one done, because the biggest, and it sucks. It really sucks. I'll just be honest with you. But the biggest judgment that investors have on new syndicators and new fund managers is your track record. What's your track record? What have you done? What's this? What's that? Which, by the way, I would utilize. You said you had a couple of flips and stuff that you've done. You definitely want to utilize that and let them know that that you've done stuff. You've had success. All that does weigh in, but they do, really key in on what's your track record like, right? And so again, with this first one, the first thing you want to do is just get one done. You want to try to make a little bit of money along the way. But again, you're just trying to establish that track record is really the goal with this first one, because it's a snowball effect. Syndications and funds are snowball effects. And I don't know if you guys follow around, obviously you're on social media because that's where you've seen this on Facebook or whatever. But, if you've noticed, like, these people will, you might hear about one thing here or one thing there. And then, next thing you know, it's like 10 units, 80 units, 150 units. Like, these things snowball. That's the beauty of a private placement, is it just snowballs and it allows you to scale so fastly, right? Or so quickly. And so it's vital to get that first one done, and so that you can get on to the second one, the third one, the fourth one, fifth one. All right. Here's what I call making it official. And this is going back to your investor. So just kind of track record, like milestoning or timelining where we're at. We've got our vehicle. We're talking to investors. We're sourcing deals. We're evaluating deals, and now we're kind of playing matchmaker between our deals and our investors. You're having that conversation. You've got a handful of them that you've been able to dig a little deeper into. You're maybe sharing some of your due diligence document or numbers with them and stuff like that. And so you're getting close, right? You're kind of moving down that path, and you're starting to get the deal and the investor to kind of start, crossing paths, or the fund as well. I say deal or fund, it's the same thing. So what a pact is something that is it's PACT. It stands for Pledge Agreement for Capital Transfer. And what this is a non-binary agreement that you would send out to your investors. So let's just paraphrase here for a second. Like, if you're having this conversation with this investor, he's interested, you share some documents and say, man, I'd really be interested in that. That's a good looking deal. Well, then your next thing should be, okay, well, hey man, I'd love to send you out, send you one of our packs. And so what's a pack? It's like, it's just sort of a non-binary agreement that just kind of lets, put your name with a number, allows us to kind of see where we're at from a commitment standpoint. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like very standoffish. It's non-binary, but what this does, it has a huge mental, it goes back to the psyche of the investor, right? Because they actually put their name on it. They put a dollar amount, and they sign it, right? Even though it's non-binary, it says right on there it's non-binary, but they sign it. And so in their mind, the psyche of when you do that is they've committed it. You know what I'm saying? Like, they've done it. And so what that does is that really kind of locks them in, hooks them in really well. And that would kind of be the next step, right? So we've got our vehicle set up. We've got our structure, all that stuff. It's all good to go. We're sourcing deals, and even in a fund, you got to be sourcing deals. You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, it goes back to the deals. The fund's just a vehicle. And so you're sourcing deals, you're talking to, prepping these investors and talking to them. And now you've narrowed it down. You got a few of them, you're sending out these packs, and you're just trying to get that mental commitment. Let you start kind of knowing your dollar amount. If you're needing $100,000 and you got 3 people in, now you're at 30,000, it kind of lets you know like where you're at from a commitment level, which is needed. And you notice at this, up to this point, well, here we go. Up to this point, we've not done anything with documents or subscription documents or any of that stuff, right? All these documents and stuff really just need to, well, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but let's just get into it. So offering docs, you don't need to even think about offering docs until you got at least 20% subscribed in your packs. Does that make sense? So you're sending out these packs. Don't even think about spending a dime on offering documents until you got at least 20% of people in, committed under a pact. Okay. And again, this is by experience. I've spent tens of thousands of dollars on PPMs and documents and stuff, and literally thrown them in the trash because they just don't work. So when you do go to getting these documents, though, thing to think about. I know this probably big stuff here kind of may scare you away a little bit, whatever, but don't overthink it. Just to give you an example with the private, the one I did with Keller Williams there, literally it was like 4 or 5 documents. The longest document may have been 12 pages. There's no regulation saying that, 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 12 pages. There's no regulation saying that a PPM has to be 185 pages. You know what I'm saying? Most of that stuff, most of the longer, well, every long PPM that I've had, that I had an attorney or somebody draft up, has actually scared away investors. Because here's the thing, is that these attorneys put so much jargon and legal mumbo jumbo in there. I mean, imagine sitting down and trying to understand 95 pages of a document that you're going to sign. And I mean, hell, half the attorneys don't even understand what it means. You know what I'm saying? And you're trying to, you as an investor are supposed to, it just, the automatic answer is no. I don't know what's in there. I'm not signing that. Right. And so that, you want to keep it simple. You want to keep it precise, and you want it to document what you've already agreed on. You know what I'm saying? Because you've already been talking with these investors, right? You've already had these conversations. You've already prepped everybody. You've already got them signed on a pack. Like, in order for them to sign in a pack, you've had to have already talk about returns. Remember, you ask them, what do you think on that? It's like, yeah, 20%. I'll do that all day long. Okay, well, I've got you at 20%. You know what I'm saying? And so then you're going to use these documents to, to document what you've already agreed on. Is that making sense? Like, don't go out and spend all this money and stuff. I'm telling you from experience. But when you do get into it, there are some documents that that are needed. The first one's a private placement agreement, or PPM, private placement memorandum. A couple different words there, but basically what that is a document that just kind of outlines what you're doing, about 5 or 10%, and then 90 to 95% of it is just legal mumbo jumbo about investing is risky, right? That's basically what it means. What I did with this most recent one is the private placement agreement is I actually kept it just to the 5 to 10% that's normally in those things, talking about the deal, the structure, the what you're offering, how the structure basically is what you're documenting there. And then I did the notice to investors, which is a separate document, which was about 13 pages, that was all the, hey, investing is risky, and you can lose your money. Because that's really, you put those in there to cover your own butt, really. The next one would be a subscription agreement. And what a subscription agreement is it's really documenting who you are, that, what the company is, who the investor is. They are investing so much X amount of dollars. They're getting X amount of units, or, because whenever you're doing this, you got to think of it as a business. You know what I'm saying? Like, no different than they're basically buying stock is what they're doing. They're buying units. They're buying stocks in the investment company or in the syndication. And so that's what the subscription document is. Subscription agreement. It basically is just outlining the investment, who they are, how much they're coming in, how much units they're getting, sort of the breakdown of that. Operating agreement of the fund or syndication, that, we know what an operating agreement is, but you do need that in there because they will need to sign that, because that does, especially in a syndication, it does outline, like, roles and distributions and stuff like that. Same thing for a fund, but fund is a little more general, if that makes sense. An investor questionnaire is it's basically what it sounds. It's a questionnaire for the investor. That's where they identify as accredited, non-accredited. They check a few boxes about things that they understand around the investment. But all that together is again, I don't want it to overwhelm you. It's really, really not that complicated. When I first was getting started in this, I got hung up on the documents. Like I said, I spent tens of thousands. I mean, like $50,000 in draft an attorney to draft all these documents. It literally took them like 6 months, and the support was minimal on the rear, after the fact. And it literally went in the trash. I mean, it was a 100% of a waste. And it's not that complicated once you do, been in 20 plus of these like I have. Don't put a lot of pressure on yourself, if that makes any sense. I've literally used documents over and over again. Okay. Does that make sense? Like, a lot of this actually becomes a template, and it's all just reusable, if that makes sense. Guys, follow me? I don't want to make sure I'm losing you. So, all right.
And yeah. And just like, I guess, an anecdote, it's kind of like, a real estate packet, you have all your disclosure, disclaimers and stuff. You have your purchase and sale agreement, your lead-based paint disclosure,
100%.
affiliated business. So that's kind of how I see it. You have a packet of documents that you need to do.
I agree. And these attorneys and stuff, don't get me wrong, they're worth their weight in gold when you need them in the right place. But there's a huge fortune being made every year on this gray area because nobody really understands it. You know what I'm saying? Because there is no right answer of what a private placement is, or a PPM is, or a subscription. There's no, like checklist. It's got to have this. So what that does is it opens it up for people's opinion. And so it's a gray area to where they can charge anywhere from, 25 to literally $150,000, $200,000 for these documents and everything to be drafted. And, in my experience, the attorney, don't get me wrong, all mine are attorney reviewed. I don't necessarily have them draft them, but I have them reviewed. And, they scare away your investors. I mean, put yourself in your investor's shoes for a minute. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm about to put $100,000 into this single family residence, and this guy's bringing me a 185-page packet of all these documents. Like, good Lord, 65 pages of it is just legal stuff that, even if they are interested, what do? They turn around, they say, okay, let me send this to my attorney. Well, now you've got attorney versus attorney, and you got two gorillas in a room that both of them want to be paid, want to try to earn their money. And so it's just back and forth, and you get deal fatigue. And the investor's like, you know what, this is just more trouble than it's worth. I'm just going to move on. And so that's my experience with it. Just don't beat yourself up over these documents and stuff. It's really not that complicated. So anyway, I'm going to try to move on. I know we're probably going on an hour or better here. Make a capital call. So this is where, so now we got our vehicle, we've got, we're having conversations with investors, we're having, looking at deals, we're marrying them up. We've got a few that are interested in a deal or in our offering, and we've sent out our pack. We've got some commitments in. We're 20-30%, we're 20% committed. So now we've got our documents put together. We've got those sent out. We've actually got our investors have signed the documents. We've not accepted any capital now. You know what I'm saying? At this point, we're still not. It's all just imaginary, if you will, through the packs, right? We're 20%, 30% committed through packs, and we've got, but we do have our investor packet signed. We got our documents signed and everything, and so now we are ready to actually make a capital call. And so your first capital call is when you have 20-30% of commitments in your packs, and the money, and what a capital call is essentially an email. You email, you got 5 investors, they're all in for 100. You got them signed up on the docs, and you say, okay, look, we've identified an asset. We're ready to move forward. We're going to make a capital call. This is our capital call. And in your and when they sign the documents, by the way, there's punishment I hate punishment, such a bad word. There's replications for not sending in your capital. Does that make sense? If you wanted to, I've done it both ways. As soon as they sign the docs, sometimes I've told them, like, hey, I need you to go ahead and send in the capital immediately. I like doing it that way. Sometimes, you don't necessarily have something identified yet. You're not necessarily ready to buy something. And so if you do call that down, there might be a month or two there that your money's kind of sitting there. That kind of makes them a little iffy sometimes. So it is deal specific in where you're at there. But in general sense, it's good to have them on the hook, get the documents signed, they're ready to go, and you just let them know, say, hey, look, we're close on a couple acquisitions. Soon as we're ready to make an allocation, soon as we're ready to buy this thing, we're going to send you an email, let you know. As soon as we do, within 7 days or 3 days, whatever, we're going to need you to wire that money, right? And so that's where you're at. You make the capital call, you send out the email, say, hey, Mr. Investor, Mrs. Investor, we've identified, we're ready to pull down on make a capital call. And then you give them the wiring instruction to your subscription account, and they send that money in. So now that they've sent the money in, now the time starts on your 15-day filing for your Reg D. Because again, remember, nothing starts from a timing standpoint until they actually send you the capital, right? So even the documents technically don't have to be done until after you receive the capital, but in my experience, it's best just to go ahead and get that out of the way right before you actually bring in the capital. So now you've got your money, you've got $500,000 sitting in your subscription account. The next thing you need to do is actually go and do your Reg D notice, filing that. If you guys got, I know I'm going on time here. I hate to keep keep you any longer, but if you got just a few seconds, I'll walk you through it real quick. Is that cool? All right, so I'm gonna stop presenting and then I'm gonna do another tab here, hopefully. Try to figure out my deal here. All right, so here we are. So where you go for this is fcc.gov. And this is like if you're a brand new filer here, you're gonna go over here to filings. You can go to information for filers, and they make this stuff really easy. They've actually gotten a lot easier since my first fund about 4 years ago. Step 1, apply for EDGAR access. So you got to apply for access, and then once you get your access codes, you use those to get into EDGAR to actually do the Reg D filing. That makes sense. And I'm not going to actually fill all this out, but I will kind of go through it. You click on the begin right over here in the top left, apply for EDGAR access, new. So there's other things you can do here, but for this case, we're just doing a new one. And so there it is. You do application for new. What this down here, continue save application, is they do, if you get halfway through it and you need to save it, they do give you a way to save it and to come back, which is, it works about 75% of the time, but it is handy when it works. So then you go next, and then it starts. And so it's really not that bad. You got these different tabs you got to fill out. Again, company name or individual, you'd be a company. Name of applicant. Now, the applicant here would either be the syndication or the fund. It is not your GP, okay? So the applicant is the fund or the syndication. Remember, you got to make sure you do that. It's not a big deal if you mess it up. My first one, I messed it up and did my my sponsor name and my company name versus the fund name. But then you just go in and do an amendment. They make it pretty easy. So you fill that out, file our information. I mean, this is all, pretty easy stuff. It's nothing overcomplicated, mostly contact information and stuff. Here's your documents that you'll need. Gosh, I forget what all this is. This is a PDF that you got to put in here. I forget what it is. So you are going to do a correspondent because that's what it tells you to do here. Authorize, document your form. Let's see. Okay. So this is where it gets tricky. I got hung up on this. This is one thing. This is probably worth $100,000 by itself because I got hung up on this big time. You have to upload a PDF, notarized PDF copy of your application. Okay. So that means, this tab, this tab, this tab, and then your documents will upload. Your signature, you'll have to do that. But you won't be able to move forward until you upload your application, your notarized application, right? And so forever, I was like, man, there's no way to download this, right? This is what they want you to do. You got to hit print. And when you print, I don't know if it's going to let me do it or not because I don't have anything filled out. I guess it's not. But anyway, when you hit print, it will come up like in a browser, and it'll be your entire application with your signature and everything on it. Or let's see, I can't remember if you do signature or not. I think you do. Go ahead and do the signature, and then what you'll do is you'll print that out, and then you'll take it and get it notarized, and then you'll come back to this. And this is the reason why they let you save it, I guess. You'll come back to this and you'll hit correspondent, and then you'll upload that PDF document here, and then it'll allow you to actually, move forward here. Make your phrase. You'll need this phrase. Like I said, you got to read all this stuff. I mean, it's very self-explanatory, but you'll make this passphrase because you'll need that when you're actually accessing the next step, which is EDGAR. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? I know that's getting a little technical real quick, but is that all right? Cool. All right. So anyway, that's pretty much that. Again, like I said, it's not overcomplicated. I can help you with that stuff. The first time I did that, man, I racked my brain for I swear it was like a month trying to figure out how to do that. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go all the way back, because that's step one, right? So once you do that, and then what happens is you submit that, it takes a day or two for them to get back to you. Because remember, you're under a 15-day time here frame, right? So you need to kind of get this started, but it'll take a day. I've gotten, the last one I got back was like within 3 hours, which was the quickest one. Typically it takes like 1 to 3 days for them to get back. And what happens is you'll get an email and it'll say, you know, your application or whatever has been approved, and it'll submit you out what they call some a CIK code, I think is what it's called, and you'll need that for this second step. So the second step is down here, submit and manage your filings. You're going to go to this first one, log in for ownership forms, and you're looking for Regulation D. So you click on that one, and see mine's already populated here from one of my other offerings, but it's CIK and then the password, which is the passphrase you used for in the previous step. And so then you'll log in there. And then what you'll do is you'll come over here to File Form D. Click on that bad boy. A new filing. Next. And then it'll pull up this. Now all this jazz right here is, again, it seems like a lot, but this is all pretty self-explanatory stuff. See, the CIK is already, the CCC, that's what you get from them. They'll give you that, but it's automatically populated in here in their system. And so then you just start going through it, you know, identifying who you are, your, like I said, I'm not going to get real deep into this. There's a few technical things that you need to do. Is it not going to let me go next? Related persons. It's not going to let me go through it. But anyway, there's a couple ones down here, like the sales commission. There's certain things that you got to click on there. And there's 3 or 4 ways to fill that out. Which again, like I said, I don't want to sound like it's overcomplicated. It's not too bad. Once you've done it 3 or 4 times, it's not too bad. All right, so let me see what I'm trying to do here. I'm gonna get back to the other one. I tell you what, let me give you a quick tip too. If you go to sec.gov, talking about everything in that filling out that second part, because like I said, some of that stuff is just seems really complicated, right? So you can go to filings and you can go to company filing search. And so say you want to look up Cardone. I use him as an example all the time. Say you want to look up Grant Cardone's fund. So you can go to Grant Cardone Equity Fund. This is the very first one he launched. You go here and you can see D as in Form D, notice to exempt offerings. You can click on it, and it's that exact form we were just filling out. It's exactly what he did. So that, I mean, it's literally telling you how he filled it out. So like the related persons would be Cardone Capital. He's got him as manager, name of issuer. There's a couple things you need to add here, which, like I said, I'm not going to get into it, but on how to set that up. But he got him as a promoter. You know, there's other things. This here is a pooled investment, so you can see like how he structured his first offering was a pooled investment vehicle or pooled investment fund. Other offering. What else did he do here? Decline to close. That's every one of them. You always click that. He did a 506C. A new notice. First sale yet to occur. So he filed this, you know, which whenever you're doing yours, if you actually committed capital, you would put, you would click, there's no little X, it's a date of first sale. And then you would actually put how much. So he's got equity here. So it's an equity fund, minimum investment. Where is it? Here it is. So like his is a $40 million fund. And total amount sold. So say if you were doing $1 million offering and you know you got 20%, so you had 200,000 at the time of doing this, you would put 200,000 here. Does that make sense? And then it would automatically calculate your $800,000 in remaining to be sold. And then the one thing you would do is as you sold more of that offering, you would come back in and do it's basically the exact same thing, except you do an amendment and you would add how much more you've sold. Does that make sense? And then, but that's pretty much, so, I mean, it literally gives you exactly the footprint. Are you guys seeing that? Oh crap, did I not share the screen?
We could see the Cardone Equity Fund at the top.
Oh crap, okay, it opened up in a new tab. Hold on just a second, let me do this. That's on Charles. You should have told me, Charles. What's this called? It's SEC Form D. Sorry about that, guys. All right, can you see that?
Yeah, now we got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so see, this is the exact form that we were just looking at, and so you can see how he's, you can see his name of the issuer, who it is, Grant Cardone or Cardone Capital, manager, pooled investment fund. Which if you're doing real estate, it's usually best to do. You can do real estate. There's all kinds of little tricks. And so here's one thing about the Reg D. When you're filing these Reg Ds, these are just notices of filing. So you're just basically letting them know that you made an offering and how much, and where it's at and stuff like that. There's no annual reporting. There's no real questioning about any of this stuff, if that makes sense. You can see that he did a 506C. Is a new notice. Equity. It's an equity offering. Minimum investment, $100,000. 40 is a $40 million offering. Was his first one. He had sold zero at the time of this offering, or time of this notice. And look, he signed it himself, Grant Cardone. Pretty cool, huh? So I mean, you can go through here and you can go through and search anybody. I mean, this is for syndications. That's for funds. I mean, without going through 15 different screens here, it keeps opening up different screens. But, let me get back to this real quick. Oh crap, wrong one. I'm losing my spot here. There it is. All right, so that's sort of the filing walkthrough real quick. It's just in general, it's a two-step process. The first one's really just filling out you getting your EDGAR access codes. Once you do that, within a couple of days, you're going to get your access codes. You're going to start that second phase, which again, you can go through SEC, search company filings, type in any name. I mean, I'm one of them weird ones. Like I literally will go in there and look and research people. Like I've been through probably almost, I ain't gonna say every one, but a lot of like Blackstones. I've been through a lot of Blackstone offerings and stuff because I just love watching how they structure. You know what I'm saying? I love seeing the deal structure and how, they're raising hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. It's like, okay, how are they doing that? What's so attractive to their offering? And you can also go through there and like it'll say search latest offerings. So you can actually see like who's filed today. And you can see that there's, 14,000 people filed today, and you can go through there and see what are they doing. And so that's a way that I research and kind of stay on top of like the most cutting edge strategies and what's hooking the investor today, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And, it was really interesting. A little while back, I was looking, what was it? A little while back, I was looking through there and like every offering was some sort of hedge fund, right? Like offshore hedge fund, like all these different things. And so, it kind of gives you a glimpse into the insider world of what the big boys are doing and what the people that are moving trillions of dollars around the world, what are they doing and how they're doing it, right? They're all doing it they're doing it through these private placements and these offerings. And it just allows you to really kind of dive into it and understand it a little bit better. So if you're like me and you kind of nerd out on that stuff, it's a great resource just to go through and gain some insider knowledge. This little tab here, InvestNext, I highly recommend them. That's the back office that I use, the software for crowdfunding. It starts out at $55 a month, and it's an amazing portal. It's an investor portal. It allows, you can put it on your website. It allows them to go in there, register. You can ask questions. It's just absolutely amazing what you can do with it. And it also automates all the documents. So all those documents that we're talking about, It all goes in there. They can electronically sign. I mean, any of my offerings or all my offerings, I literally say, hey, if you got somebody interested, I can send them a link. It'll go directly there, and they can create an account. I can get some questions from them, like, again, what are you interested in? How much are you interested in investing? What's your investment time horizon? Look like, is it within a month, within 6 months, like a year, like, when are you looking to invest? They go in. Once they're in there, all my offerings are in there. All the waterfall, which is the distributions and everything, is all set up inside there. So they can literally click on an offering, review my marketing materials, whatever I want them to see, whatever I have in there for them, and click on invest now. They can fill out sign the documents, just one, just like it's I think they use HelloSign is technically they use. So we've all used electronic signatures by now, but you click on those, takes you all the way through. And then the last step, they actually commit right there and, link their checking account or whatever, ACH, and it's connected to my bank account. And so it literally transfers the money right in. There is a small charge there. I think it maxes out like at $25 or something, but for the ease and everything, it's just cost of doing business. But then after they've committed, it also gives them live results of like where they're at return wise. I mean, you can see a little graph down there at the bottom right. It gives them like real graphs, real time information, I guess. It houses their docs for them, and the big thing is, which is what I love, is that when it comes like distribution time, K1 time, text time, and all that stuff, it'll export all that out to your CPA. It'll handle distributions. So like CPA will prepare all that, come back in, and they'll handle all the distributions, the K1s, the returns. Like it is your back office, if that makes sense. And it is a crucial tool. Not a lot of people talk about it for some reason, but I've been through all the crowd streets and the who's all the other ones, the big ones. I mean, they want $13, $17, $27,000. They make you sign these 3-year commitments and all this crazy stuff. These guys, especially for getting started, $55 a month, no contract, month to month. They are fantastic, and I can't speak highly enough of them. So that's a good one there. But anyway, finally to the end after 3 hours later. Any follow-up questions? Anything that comes to mind?
Yeah. So as far as your operating agreement that says like what you're going to manage, and like, do you have the capability to structure it to where you're not the one who is? So do you have to actually find the deal, manage the renovations, find the tenant, all that and the other, or are you allowed as the manager to manage the people who do that? I'd assume that would be the case, but is that in your operating agreement, or what limitations, what ties your hands to you saying, hey, here's what I'm doing versus what you can hire out with the funds that you're taking from other people?
Yes, that's in your private placement, your PPM, and in the operating agreement. And that's like me. I'm not involved in like, let's take multifamily, for example. My role as a fund manager, my number one obligation is to the success of the fund, right? My second one would be to manage the properties, and what that means is you're managing the property managers. You know what I'm saying? So like you'll have a property manager in there, and then they got to report to you. You set up whatever you want. I mean, I make sure that I'm getting, reports. I'm getting, move-ins, move-outs. Like I'm getting all these updates and documents, and then I'll go do on-site tours. Now, if there's a value add, if we're going through a value add process or something like that, I am a little more involved in that just because my experience in that space and the ability to be able to import products and stuff like that, so I kind of have to be, but you're exactly right. You document, you put all that in there, even on the businesses that we're pursuing. Like I'm pursuing businesses that, they have management systems and processes in place. I'm not going there to work in it. I'm going there to own it and work on it. I want to improve it from a high level, and I'm not going there to, get in the grind. And so all my PPMs and all my operating agreements and everything specify that the duties of the manager is to, perform basically perform for the fund in any way that I see fit and how I see fit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir. Anything, Eric? You good?
Hey, yeah, actually, for in the beginning, right? 503, what was it? 503B, 503C.
506, 506C.
Okay, which one, like, would you start with in the beginning with, as far as like being able to market and pull investors in? It seems like that would be the way to go, right? I don't know. Like, unless you, like you were talking about family or friends or something of that nature, I guess that's where you'd fall into the other one, right?
Yeah, that 100% goes back to your network. You know, if you know, well, yeah, it goes back to your network. So, like, let's take for example the Keller Williams things that I did, the Life by Design fund that I offered inside there. That was a 506B because they all knew each other. They all, you know, it was built within this group of people, right? But for example, my other fund, you know, some of my other funds are 506Cs because I didn't have a group of investors that would be interested in that investment, that I didn't have enough of them that would invest enough to make it to be able to do what I need to do. So I do 506Cs. So therefore I can get on social media. I can make those marketing techniques, and I do the funnel, you know, like I owned a media agency for a little while, and, you know, going through the whole click funnels and, you know, Russell Brunson and all this stuff, you know, learning all that has been tremendous in the ability to be able to raise capital through social, you know, crowdfunding, true crowdfunding, because it's all the same. It's a funnel. You know, you create content, you create you marketing content, all this stuff, and you just drive people down. And this is where InvestNext comes in so beneficial, because that essentially becomes part of your funnel. You know, you get them down, you know, you can do trainings, you do walkthroughs, you can do all this different content, and you're literally driving these people down to click on that link to go to register in your InvestNext, because it's also like a CRM. So it has their name, their phone number, the email, all that stuff in there, what they're interested in, all the questions you ask when you set it up. And then, you know, at the end of that funnel would be them essentially investing. So once they're in there, then it goes back to emailing. You know, you email them, you text them, hey, notice that you know, text is powerful. You can text them, hey, I noticed that you registered. Love to, you know, set up a one-to-one meeting with you, answer any questions you may have, you know, see if there's anything specific about our deal. What did you like? What you didn't like? You know, and so that becomes your funnel, and you can only do that through a 506C. But that's also accredited only. So again, you're targeting accredited only. But I'll tell you a little side trick too, is that I started with a 506C because, again, I didn't have the network. I didn't have the people. Through my marketing efforts, I ended up building a list, right? I ended up building a non-accredited list, and I ended up building an accredited list. And so the accredited list was the ones I talked about that offering on, right? But now, because I've already had conversations with them, the non-accredited, now I have a pre-existing relationship with my non-accredited. And so the next fund could be a 506B that I build just for these non-accredited that were interested. And I say, hey, look, this one is not for you. You know, I can't let you in on this one. However, my next one, you know, I'm doing one next that will be built just for you. And you see what I'm saying? So they kind of start complementing each other. The only thing you want to be careful about is running a 506B and a 506C at the same time for the exact same thing. So like I have 506Cs for, say, multifamily or business acquisition, M&A, but I also have 506B, but it's in single family real estate. So I keep those separate. You know, see what I'm saying? Because where you run in trouble, if you have a 506B for multifamily real estate and you have a 506B for multifamily real estate, you're marketing for this one, but yet you're also having this one active. That's where it gets a little convoluted. So you want to make sure you don't do that. But I see there's something else I was going to tell you too. Something else I do too is I always use some sort of calendar link or something like that to get them to where, you know, like say they click here to you know, which I guess the funnel, the InvestNext does it as well. But the reason why I do that is because if I ever do get audited or some, you know, SEC or somebody comes in and say, hey, wait a minute, you know, we think you're marketing for non-accredited, then you can go back and say, hey, look, no, they registered with me. Here's my documentation on my calendar, you know, because it keeps track of like your meetings and stuff. And so that's another way to kind of document that process. You know what I'm saying? That's one thing I make sure I document the process through the funnel, and I'm not pushing anything on them unless they're accredited. If they're non-accredited, then it's, they're voluntarily clicking on the link. We had a meeting. We got to know each other. We had 3 phone calls after that. You see what I'm saying? So now they're like, show us your pre-existing relationship. Like, well, yes, we had a meeting. We had 3 phone calls. We text 7 different times,
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask is kind of, I'm glad you touched on that, to kind of tap into that market without actually marketing them, how you kind of can get around that and to potentially get into deals that the accredited investors wouldn't want to be involved with, right? But that, I'm glad you touched on that. That's a really clever way of doing it.
Again, it was bringing in that marketing component, and it's a constant battle between like, touching the regulation line. You know what I'm saying? You don't ever want to cross it, but it's a constant battle of like touching that line. Like, how close can I get without crossing it? And, and making sure that you're, and honestly, and still doing good by your investors. Don't get me wrong. Like, nobody should be out there abusing this or doing anything wrong for investors. This is all about, this is about growing as a group. It's owning a quarter of a watermelon rather than 100% of a grape, is what this is. And, it's a really, really great tool once you understand it, get through some of the weeds here. I know it's a lot, and I'm pouring a lot on you here, and I could go on for another couple hours, but it's once you understand it and get one under your belt, man, like your whole perception change, like your life will change. You're like, man, sky's the limit. I can buy anything. I'm Superman.
So. Yeah, good stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, guys,
I appreciate
got
a lot of notes. Yeah, great. Thank you.
And I am recording this too. So like I said, I'll be happy to share the recording with you. The presentation, I'll download that and send it to you guys too. Like, have it, take a look at it, ping me back with any notes or email me or whatever, and try to help you guys out.
Yeah, man. Went well.
Yeah, appreciate it, Will.
Thanks, Will.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.